I always believed betrayal came with warning signs, late-night phone calls, secret text messages, lipstick on a shirt, a forgotten anniversary. What I never expected was betrayal delivered in a plain white envelope taped to my own front door. The day it happened started like every other Tuesday. I left my office just after 5, stopped at my favorite coffee shop, and picked up 2 lattes, one for me and one for my husband, Daniel. It had become our little ritual after long workdays. We'd sit on the back porch, complain about our bosses, laugh about our neighbors, and spend an hour pretending adulthood wasn't nearly as exhausting as it really was. At least, that's what I thought we'd be doing that evening. As I pulled into our driveway, something immediately felt wrong. A white envelope was stuck beneath a brass door knocker. At first I assumed it was another flyer from a landscaping company, or maybe a notice from the Homeowners Association about someone's trash cans being left out overnight. I almost ignored it, but then I noticed the bold letters printed across the front. Legal notice. My stomach tightened. I balanced the coffee cups in one hand while pulling the envelope free with the other. The paper inside was thick, official. My eyes landed on the first sentence. Notice to vacate the property within 30 days. I blinked, then read it again. And again. There had to be a mistake. The address was ours. Our house. The little blue colonial Daniel and I had bought 5 years earlier after saving every spare dollar we had. I remembered painting the nursery even though we weren't expecting a baby yet, planting roses together, arguing over kitchen cabinets, celebrating when we finally made our first mortgage payment. This wasn't just a house. It was our life. Someone had obviously mixed up the paperwork. I laughed nervously and shook my head. Wrong address, I whispered. I reached for my phone to call the number printed on the notice. Before I could dial, it rang. The caller ID made my heart sink. Patricia Carter. My mother-in-law. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Patricia never called unless she wanted something. After a moment, I answered. Hello. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I assume you've seen the notice. I frowned. What notice? The one on the front door. I looked back at the paper in my hand. Patricia. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. I laughed. An uncomfortable, confused laugh. I think someone sent legal papers to the wrong address. No. She paused just long enough for my stomach to knot. They sent them exactly where they were supposed to. The coffee slipped slightly in my hand. What are you talking about? You have 30 days to leave. Silence. I honestly thought she was joking. Leave? Where? My house. I stared at the front door. Our house. No, Emma. Her voice remained perfectly steady. My house. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. I don't understand. I know you don't. She almost sounded amused. I've tried to explain to Daniel for years that trusting you was dangerous. What? You heard me. I gripped the phone tighter. This isn't funny. I wasn't trying to be. I took a slow breath. Daniel and I own this house. No. She answered immediately. You thought you did. For a second, the entire world seemed to stop moving. Cars drove past. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A lawn sprinkler clicked rhythmically across a neighbor's yard. Everything looked perfectly normal. Except nothing was. Patricia. My voice barely came out. Double quotes. What did you do? I didn't do anything. Another pause. My son did. The line went dead. I stood frozen in the driveway. The coffees had gone cold. I didn't even notice. A few minutes later, Daniel's car pulled in beside mine. He smiled when he saw me. Double quotes. Hey, Em. Then he noticed the paper in my hand. His smile disappeared. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't ask why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. He just stared at the notice and lowered his eyes. That was the exact moment I knew. He already knew. Maybe he'd known for years. I walked toward him slowly. Daniel. He swallowed. I can explain. Those 4 words shattered something inside me. Because innocent people don't start with I can. Explain. I handed him the notice. Tell me this isn't real. He didn't answer. Instead, he rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. Daniel. Still nothing. Finally, barely above a whisper. He said the words that changed my life forever. I'm sorry. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. Sorry for what? He closed his eyes. I put the house in Mom's name. I couldn't breathe. The world blurred. I waited for him to smile. To tell me it was some horrible misunderstanding. To laugh and say he'd misspoken. He never did. Instead, he quietly added, I should have told years ago. I wish I could tell you I screamed, that I threw something, that I slapped Daniel across the face and walked away, but that's not what happened. I just stood there, completely still. Sometimes the worst kind of pain doesn't make you react. It makes you stop. I looked at my husband, the man I'd loved for nearly 8 years, and suddenly realized I didn't know him at all. What do you mean? I whispered. You put the house in your mother's name? Daniel wouldn't look at me. He stared at the driveway instead. It was years ago. That doesn't answer my question. He sighed. I was going to tell you. When? He hesitated. I don't know. I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because my brain refused to believe what I was hearing. So your plan was just to hope I'd never find out? It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. He rubbed his temples. You know how Mom is. I almost laughed again. There it was. The sentence I'd heard hundreds of times. You know how Mom is. Whenever Patricia criticized my cooking, whenever she called me lazy because I worked from home on Fridays, whenever she accidentally forgot to invite me to family dinners, whenever she told Daniel he could have done better, his answer was always the same. That's just Mom. Except this wasn't another rude comment. This was my home. No, I said quietly. I don't know how your mother is. I know how you always excuse her. He finally met my eyes. Emma, no. I held up my hand. I've spent years trying to earn that woman's approval. I cooked Thanksgiving dinner because she said my generation didn't know how. I hosted Christmas because she complained your sister never cleaned. I spent every birthday smiling while she made little jokes about me, and through all of it, I felt tears burning my eyes. You already knew she owned our house. Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear. I thought it would never matter. I stared at him. Never matter, he nodded weakly. The house was always going to be ours, except it isn't. It would have been. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What does that even mean? He took a deep breath. When we bought the house, his voice cracked. Double quotes. My credit wasn't good enough. I frowned. That's not true. Our mortgage was approved together. It was. So why are you lying? I'm not. He leaned against the car. The bank approved the loan, but Mom kept saying something else. I already knew where this was going. She said marriages don't last. He nodded. She said if we ever divorced, I'd take everything. Another nod. I closed my eyes. So instead of trusting your wife, you trusted your mother. It wasn't about trust. Then what was it about? I was scared. I opened my eyes. Scared of me? No. Then who? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The answer had controlled his entire life. His mother. Daniel took a shaky breath. Mom said she would help us. Help us. How? She said if the house was in her name, it would be protected. Protected from what? He swallowed. From divorce. I couldn't believe this conversation was real. So while I was working overtime, while I was paying half the mortgage, while I skipped vacations so we could make extra payments, I wasn't building my future. I was paying off your mother's house. He whispered, I'm sorry. Those words meant nothing anymore. I walked past him and into the living room. Every wall suddenly felt unfamiliar. The family photos. The furniture we'd picked together. The kitchen, where we danced while making pancakes on Sunday mornings. Had any of it ever really belonged to me, or had I simply been a guest, paying the mortgage on someone else's property? I walked upstairs in silence. Daniel followed a few steps behind. Emma. I ignored him. Please talk to me. I opened our bedroom closet and pulled out the thick blue binder that held every important document we'd ever signed. Insurance papers, mortgage statements. Tax returns, utility contracts. I dumped everything onto the bed. Page after page, receipt after receipt. I searched for one thing. The deed. It wasn't there. I searched again. Nothing. A third time, still nothing. My hands started shaking. Where is it? Daniel didn't answer. I looked up. Where is the deed? He stood in the doorway like a guilty child. I never kept a copy. You never kept a copy. Mom handled it. Of course she did. I grabbed my purse. Where? Are you going to the county records office first thing tomorrow? Emma, please, if you're telling me the truth. I looked him straight in the eyes. Double quotes. Then tomorrow I'll see it in black and white, and if you're lying. I paused. I'll know that too. That night. Neither of us slept. Daniel stayed on his side of the bed. I stayed on mine. Less than 3 feet separated us. It felt like 3,000 miles. The next morning, I drove straight to the county clerk's office as soon as it opened. A kind woman behind the counter asked for the property address. She typed for a few seconds, then turned the monitor slightly toward herself. Her polite smile faded. Just a moment, she printed several pages and placed them on the counter. These are the current ownership records. My eyes immediately found the owner's name, Patricia and Carter. My mother logged. I read it again and again. The purchase date matched the day Daniel and I had closed on the house. My name was nowhere on the document, neither was Daniel's. I felt the room begin to spin. The clerk looked at me with concern. Ma'am, are you all right? I could barely hear her. There was only one thought repeating inside my head. For 5 years I had been paying for a house that legally wasn't mine. I sat in my car outside the county clerk's office for nearly 20 minutes. The ownership records rested on the passenger seat beside me. I kept hoping that if I looked away long enough, the words would somehow change. They didn't. Owner. Patricia and Carter. Not Emma Carter. Not Daniel Carter. Just Patricia. 5 years. 5 years of mortgage payments. 5 years of property taxes. 5 years of repairs. 5 years of believing I was building a future. Instead, I'd been paying for a house that legally belonged to my mother log. I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. Emma. I saw the records. Silence. So it wasn't a mistake. No, you really did it. No. Did you ever plan on telling me? Another long pause. I wanted to, but I didn't know how. I laughed bitterly. You had 5 years to figure it out. He didn't argue. I'll be home in an hour, he finally said. We need to talk. No, we need to fix this. I don't think you understand. My voice was calmer than I expected. I don't want another explanation. I want the truth. Then I hung up. When I got home, Patricia's black Mercedes was already parked in my driveway. Of course it was. She wasn't waiting inside. She was standing on my front porch as if she owned the place. Because legally, she did. She smiled when she saw me. I was wondering how long you'd be. I ignored her and unlocked the door. She followed me inside without asking. I've spoken to a realtor. I froze. You what? The market is excellent right now. She looked around the living room like she was evaluating furniture in a hotel. I think we could sell this place within a month. I stared at her. I still live here. For now, you can't be serious. Oh, Emma, she sighed dramatically. I've been serious since the day Daniel married you. I set my purse on the kitchen counter. Why are you doing this? She looked genuinely surprised. Because it's my house. No, I shook my head. I mean, why now? She smiled. I've waited long enough. What does that mean? It means my son finally understands. The front door opened. Daniel walked in. The second he saw both of us standing there, his shoulders dropped. Mom, Daniel. She smiled warmly at him, then looked back at me. I think it's time we all behaved like adults. I crossed my arms. Great. Then tell me why you want me out. Patricia folded her hands. I've never believed you were right for my son. There it was. Finally. No pretending. No passive-aggressive comments. No fake smiles. Just honesty. You've always encouraged him to make decisions without me. She shrugged. Someone had to. You've spent years trying to convince him I was using him. I was protecting him. From what? You. I couldn't help smiling. She frowned. What's funny? You honestly believe that? I know it. I looked at Daniel. Are you hearing this? He stayed silent. That hurt more than anything Patricia had said. I turned toward him. Say something. He looked at his mother. Then at me. I just want everyone to calm down. I laughed. Of course you do, Emma. No. I pointed toward Patricia. She just admitted. She's been trying to destroy our marriage. I never said that. You didn't have to. Patricia walked calmly into the dining room. She picked up one of our wedding photos. The one from our honeymoon in Maine. She studied it for a moment before placing it back on the shelf. You always looked happier before you met her, Daniel. I watched my husband's face. He didn't defend me. Not once. Instead, he quietly asked, "What do you want us to do, Mom?" "Us, not her. Us." Patricia smiled. "I've already arranged everything." She pulled a folder from her designer handbag and handed it to Daniel. He opened it. His face went pale. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. I reached for the papers. He tried to stop me. Too late. It was a listing agreement. Our house no. Her house already prepared for sale with photographs, a suggested asking price, and a realtor's signature. The only thing missing was Patricia's final approval. I looked up slowly. "You already plan to sell it?" She nodded. Double quotes yes. "Before I even got the eviction notice." "Of course. You never expected me to fight." "I didn't think you'd have any reason to." My hands were shaking. "This is unbelievable." "Patricia, step closer. You'll find another place. I built this home." "No." She smiled coldly. "You decorated it." Those words hit harder than I expected, because she wanted them to. She wanted every memory I'd made inside these walls to feel worthless. She wanted me to question whether I had ever belonged here at all. She almost succeeded. Almost. Then the doorbell rang. Patricia frowned. "Were you expecting someone?" "No." I walked to the front door. A man in a navy suit stood on the porch holding a clipboard. "Good afternoon. I'm here for the property appraisal." I blinked. "The what?" He checked the address. Double quotes Mrs. Patricia Carter requested evaluation before listing the home. Behind me. Patricia smiled. "I hope you don't mind." She looked around the house. "I'd like it on the market by next week." I felt something inside me finally break. Not my heart. Not my marriage. My fear. I turned to the appraiser. "I'm sorry. You've made the trip for nothing." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" I smiled for the first time all day. "Because before this house goes on the market," I looked directly at Patricia, "I'm hiring the best real estate attorney in the state. For the first time since I'd met her." The smile disappeared from my mother-in-law's face. That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was scared, because my mind refused to stop replaying everything that had happened, every conversation with Patricia, every time Daniel had told me, "She's just looking out for us," every birthday, every holiday, every fake smile. For years, I thought I was imagining the hostility. Now I knew better. It had all been planned. I got out of bed around 3 in the morning and walked downstairs. The house was silent. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch. He looked exhausted. Part of me felt sorry for him. A much bigger part of me didn't. I quietly walked into the home office. If I was going to fight them, I needed every piece of paper we had. I opened the filing cabinet. Taxes. Insurance. Utility bills. Medical records. Old warranties. Receipts for furniture we'd bought together. Nothing useful. I moved to the closet. There were 3 storage boxes filled with old paperwork we'd never bothered to organize after moving in. Dust covered the lids. I pulled the first one onto the floor. Nothing. The second one contained old photo albums and Christmas decorations. Then I opened the third. At the very bottom, there was a faded blue folder. I almost tossed it aside. Instead, I opened it. Inside were dozens of documents. From the month we bought the house, mortgage estimates, inspection reports, emails from the lender, closing disclosures. I slowly flipped through each page. Most of it was familiar. Then, one sheet caught my attention. It wasn't from the bank. It wasn't from the county. It was titled, Property Protection Agreement. He frowned. I didn't remember signing anything with that name. I kept reading. Halfway down the page, one sentence made me stop breathing. Upon full repayment of the mortgage, legal ownership shall be transferred to Daniel Carter and Emma Carter. I blinked. Then read it again. There it was. My name, Daniel's name, Patricia's signature. A witness signature, even a notary stamp. What? I whispered. Is this? I searched through the folder again. There was another copy, then another page attached behind it. It explained why Patricia's name had appeared on the deed. According to the document, she had agreed to act only as a temporary legal title holder while Daniel and I completed the mortgage payments. Temporary. Not permanent, which meant one thing: she wasn't supposed to keep the house. She was supposed to transfer it back. My heart started racing. Could this really change everything? Or was I misunderstanding it? I grabbed my phone and searched for the law firm whose logo appeared in the corner of the agreement. To my surprise, it still existed. The office opened at 8:30. At exactly 8:29, I was sitting in my car outside the building. The receptionist welcomed me inside. I have an appointment with anyone who's available. She smiled politely. What is this regarding? I carefully placed the blue folder on the counter. I think someone tried to steal my house. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from attorney Michael Brooks. He looked to be in his late 40s. Professional. The kind of man who didn't waste words. He adjusted his glasses and began reading. For several minutes, he didn't say anything. Every now and then, he'd underline a sentence or place a sticky note on a page. The silence was unbearable. Finally, he looked up. Double quotes, Mrs. Carter, please tell me I'm not crazy. He smiled faintly. No, you've been lied to. I felt my chest tighten. So this agreement is real? It appears to be. Can Patricia still sell the house? He leaned back in his chair. Not if this document is authentic. I nearly cried with relief, but that single word brought me back to reality. What? I need to verify everything. Signatures, the filing history, the closing attorney, the mortgage records. If everything checks out, he tapped the agreement with his pen. Your mother-in-law may have a very serious legal problem. I swallowed. What kind of problem? He looked directly at me, the kind judges don't appreciate. Before I could ask another question, his assistant knocked on the door. Michael, she looked unusually concerned. There's a woman in reception asking for Mrs. Carter. I frowned. I didn't tell anyone I was coming here. The assistant hesitated. She says she's family. A cold feeling spread through my stomach. Michael looked at me. Do you know who it is? I already did. There was only one person who always seemed to know exactly where I was. Patricia. I slowly stood and walked toward the reception area. Through the glass doors, I saw her. Perfect hair, designer handbag, confident smile. As if she already owned the building, too. The moment our eyes met, she smiled. I've been looking for you, Emma. Patricia stood in the reception area as if she belonged there. She wore a cream-colored designer suit, pearl earrings, and the same confident smile that had haunted every family gathering for the last 8 years. The receptionist looked back and forth between us. Mrs. Carter, is everything all right? I nodded. We're family. Patricia smiled wider. Unfortunately, I ignored the comment. What are you doing here? She adjusted the strap of her handbag. I wanted to save you some money. I don't remember asking for your advice. You don't need a lawyer, Emma. Her voice remained calm, almost friendly. You need to accept reality. Before I could answer, Michael Brooks stepped into the reception area. Good morning. His tone was polite but cautious. I'm Michael Brooks. Patricia immediately extended her hand. I'm Patricia Carter. I know. She blinked. You do. I've been reviewing the documents. For the first time since I'd met her, her smile faltered. Only for a second. Then it returned. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Michael didn't respond. Instead, he asked, Mrs. Carter, are you represented by an attorney? She looked confused. No. In that case, I can't discuss this matter with you. Patricia laughed softly. Oh? I don't think that's necessary. She turned toward me. Emma, you've always been emotional. But this, she gestured toward the conference rooms. Double quotes. Is embarrassing. You've lost. There is nothing to fight. Michael calmly interrupted. Actually, He held up the agreement I'd found in the blue folder. There appears to be quite a lot to discuss. Patricia's eyes landed on the document. Her expression froze. I noticed it immediately. She recognized it. She knew exactly what it was. "What is that?" she asked. Michael didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me. "Mrs. Carter, would you mind waiting in my office for a few minutes?" I understood. He wanted Patricia gone before saying anything else. I nodded and walked away. As the office door closed behind me, I could still hear Patricia's voice in the hallway. "I don't know what she's showing you. I've owned that house for years," Michael answered calmly. "Have a nice day, Mrs. Carter." A few moments later, the receptionist gently knocked. "She's leaving." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Michael returned carrying several files. He closed the door. Then he smiled, a real smile this time. "I've confirmed something interesting." I leaned forward. "The notary who witnessed this agreement." He tapped the page. "Is still practicing. And I spoke with her this morning." My heart started pounding. "What did she say?" "She remembers the closing. She remembers your husband. She remembers Patricia. And most importantly," he slid another document across the desk, "she remembers exactly why this agreement was created." I stared at him. "It was never meant to give Patricia permanent ownership." He nodded. "Correct. She agreed to hold legal title only while the mortgage was active. Once the loan was paid off or refinanced into your name, she was legally obligated to transfer the property back." "So why didn't she?" He looked at me carefully. "Because no one asked." I frowned. "What?" "According to the paperwork, the transfer wasn't automatic. It required Patricia to sign one final deed. And she simply never did." A cold chill ran through me. "So she's been waiting." Michael nodded slowly. "It appears that way." "For how long?" He looked at the mortgage statements I'd brought with me. "Let's see." He flipped through several pages. "You made your final mortgage payment 3 months ago." I felt sick. 3 months. She hadn't waited years. She had waited for the exact moment the house was completely paid off. No mortgage. No bank. No lender watching. Just her name on the deed. It had been a trap from the very beginning. She'd allowed us to spend 5 years paying for the house. She'd smiled at every Christmas dinner, complimented the new kitchen I'd paid for, thanked me for the flowers I'd planted. All while planning to take everything the moment the last mortgage payment cleared. I covered my mouth. "My God," Michael quietly said, "I've practiced law for 23 years. I've seen siblings sue each other, parents steal inheritances, business partners destroy lifelong friendships." He paused. "But I've rarely seen someone play a game this patiently." Tears filled my eyes. "It wasn't about the house." "No," he agreed. "It was about control." He opened another folder. "I've already started requesting additional records." "What kind of records?" "Emails, closing documents, the original escrow instructions, and communications between your husband and his mother." I looked up. "Can we get those, if the case goes to court?" He nodded. "Yes." My phone suddenly buzzed. "Daniel." I stared at his name. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. "Hello." His voice sounded shaky. "Emma, my mom's furious. I can imagine. She said you hired a lawyer." "I did." He sighed heavily. "She's threatening to cut me out of her will." For a moment, I couldn't even process what he'd just said. After everything she'd done. After every lie. After stealing 5 years of my life. That was his biggest concern. I closed my eyes. "Daniel." There was a long silence. Then I asked the question that had been growing inside me since the day I found the eviction notice. "If your mother hadn't tried to throw me out, would you have ever told me the truth?" He didn't answer. Not immediately. When he finally spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. "No." That one word hurt more than every lie he'd ever told me, because it confirmed what I had been afraid to admit. I hadn't lost my home. I'd lost my marriage long before I ever found the eviction notice. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing outside the county courthouse. I had never imagined I'd be there because of my own husband or his mother. The morning air was cool, but my palms were sweating. Michael stood beside me, carrying 2 thick binders filled with evidence. He looked unusually confident. You've barely said a word all morning, I told him. He smiled. That's because I like our chances. I wasn't as sure. Patricia had money. Connections. Confidence. People like her usually won. As we entered the courtroom, I immediately spotted her. She was sitting at the plaintiff's table in an expensive navy suit, chatting with her attorney as if they were discussing vacation plans instead of trying to take someone's home. Daniel sat beside her. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. His shoulders slumped. When our eyes met, he tried to smile. I looked away. That smile belonged to the man I thought I married. Not the one sitting next to the woman who had spent years plotting against me. A few minutes later, the judge entered. Everyone stood. The courtroom fell silent. The hearing began with Patricia's attorney. He spoke with confidence. Your Honor, the ownership records are clear. Mrs. Patricia Carter is the legal owner of the property. The defendant has remained in the residence despite receiving lawful notice to vacate. He made it sound so simple. So clean, like I was just another tenant refusing to leave. Then it was Michael's turn. He walked to the podium carrying only one document, the property protection agreement. Your Honor, he began calmly, this case is not about who appears on the deed. It's about why that name appears there. He handed copies to the judge and the opposing counsel. Patricia's attorney frowned. He clearly hadn't expected this document. Michael continued. This agreement was signed on the day of closing by all parties. It states that Mrs. Carter accepted temporary legal title solely to protect the financing process and agreed to transfer ownership back once the mortgage obligations were satisfied. The judge adjusted his glasses and began reading. The courtroom became so quiet I could hear the pages turning. Then Michael introduced the next witness, the notary. An elderly woman named Linda Harris walked to the stand. After taking the oath, she looked directly at the judge. I notarized these signatures myself. Do you recognize this agreement? Yes. Was it explained to everyone before they signed it? It was. What was Mrs. Patricia Carter's role? Linda answered without hesitation. Temporary title holder. I looked toward Patricia. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked nervous. Her attorney quickly stood. Objection. The judge shook his head. Overruled. Michael wasn't finished. He requested permission to submit another piece of evidence. The courtroom clerk handed copies to everyone. I recognized the document immediately. An email, dated 5 years earlier. Sent by the closing attorney. The subject line read, Transfer of ownership after mortgage satisfaction. Michael looked toward Patricia. Double quotes Mrs. Carter. Did you receive this email? She hesitated. Double quotes. Yes. Did you read it? I don't remember. Michael smiled politely. So you don't remember replying to it? Another document appeared on the courtroom screens. It was Patricia's response. Only one sentence. I'll handle the transfer when the time comes. The courtroom fell silent. Michael waited a moment before asking his next question. Mrs. Carter, did the time ever come? Patricia's lips tightened. She didn't answer. The judge did. I believe it did. A few jurors nodded slightly. Even Patricia's own attorney looked uncomfortable. Then came the moment that changed everything. Michael called Daniel to the witness stand. My heart started racing. I honestly had no idea what he was going to say. He sat down. Avoiding my eyes, Michael asked only one question. Mr. Carter, when your mother asked you to place the home in her name, what did she promise you? Daniel closed his eyes. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Finally, in a quiet voice, he answered. She promised that, once the mortgage was paid off, she'd sign it back over to Emma and me. The courtroom erupted into whispers. The judge immediately called for order. Michael nodded. Double quotes. No further questions. Daniel slowly stood before returning to his seat. He looked at me. For the first time in weeks, there were tears in his eyes, but I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just emptiness. The judge announced a short recess before delivering his decision. As everyone stood, Michael leaned toward me. They're losing. I looked across the courtroom. Patricia wasn't speaking anymore. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was staring at the agreement on the table, as if seeing it for the first time. And for the first time since this nightmare, began, I realized something. She hadn't underestimated my lawyer. She had underestimated me. The courtroom stayed silent as the judge adjusted his glasses and looked over the final pages. One last time. It felt like no one was breathing. Not me. Not Daniel. Not even Patricia. Finally, the judge looked up. Double quotes Mrs. Carter for a split second. I thought he was talking to me. Then I remembered. Patricia was Mrs. Carter, too. He turned toward her. This court finds that the property protection agreement is valid and legally enforceable. My heart pounded. The evidence clearly demonstrates that you accepted temporary title with the obligation to transfer ownership after the mortgage was satisfied. Patricia's attorney slowly lowered his head. The judge continued, instead of honoring that agreement, you attempted to evict the individuals who paid for the property and listed the home for sale. He paused. The court considers those actions to be a breach of your contractual obligations and an attempt to unjustly retain property. Every word felt like another brick being lifted off my shoulders. Therefore, the judge signed the order. This court directs that ownership of the property be immediately transferred to Emma Carter. For a moment, I couldn't move. I had imagined this day so many times. I thought I would cry. Celebrate. Smile. Instead, I just sat there, trying to convince myself I had heard him correctly. Then I heard someone sobbing. It wasn't me. It was Daniel. He buried his face in his hands. Patricia turned toward him. Stop it. Her voice was cold. We'll appeal. The judge looked directly at her. You are certainly entitled to appeal. He closed the file. However, based on the evidence presented today, I see no reasonable likelihood of a different outcome. Her face turned pale. For the first time in her life, someone had told her no. Outside the courthouse, reporters had already gathered. Apparently, local media loved stories involving family lawsuits and real estate fraud. Microphones were everywhere. One reporter approached me. Double quotes Mrs. Carter. How do you feel after today's decision? I looked back at the courthouse doors. Then at the cameras. I didn't come here to win a house, I said quietly. I came here because I refuse to let someone rewrite the truth. The reporter nodded. Double quotes. Do you have anything you'd like to say to your former mother-in-law? I smiled politely. No, I think the judge already said everything that needed to be said. Daniel caught up with me in the parking lot. I stopped walking. He looked older than he had just a month earlier. His eyes were red. I know you probably hate me. I shook my head. I don't. He looked surprised. I don't hate you, Daniel. I just don't recognize you anymore. His shoulders slumped. I was scared of disappointing my mom. You spent your whole life trying to make her happy. I looked him in the eyes. And in the process, you broke the one person who never asked you to choose. Tears rolled down his face. I know. I've made the biggest mistake of my life. I believed him. That was the saddest part. He wasn't lying anymore. He finally understood. But understanding doesn't erase betrayal. I'm filing for divorce, I said gently. He closed his eyes. I figured. I wish I could go back. So, do one. He nodded slowly. Then, for the first time since we'd met, he didn't ask me to stay. He simply whispered, I'm sorry, and walked away. 3 months later, the paperwork was finished. The deed finally arrived. For the first time in my life, my name was the only one printed on it. Emma Carter. No hidden agreements. No secrets. No conditions. Just mine. I framed a copy of the first mortgage payment we'd ever made together. Not because I missed my marriage, but because it reminded me of something important. Hard work always belongs to the person who earns it. A year has passed since that day. People still ask if I ever hear from Patricia. No. The court ordered her to pay a portion of my legal fees, and after that, she disappeared from my life. As for Daniel, he sent a few letters. I never answered them, not because I wanted revenge, because there was nothing left to say. Some stories don't end with forgiveness. They end with acceptance. Last weekend, I planted a young maple tree in the front yard, the same yard Patricia once promised I would never see again. As I covered the roots with fresh soil, my neighbor smiled and asked, "Planning to stay here a long time?" I looked at the house, the porch Daniel and I built, the roses I'd planted years ago, the blue shutters I'd painted myself. For the first time in a very long while, it finally felt like home. I smiled. I think so, because I finally understood something that took me 8 years to learn. The house was never the prize. Peace was. And unlike the house, no one could ever steal that from me again.
Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.